welcome to World Insight. I'm Tian Wei from Beijing. U.S. climate envoy John Kerry is set to travel to China this week, seeking collaboration on climate action. It will be the first official visit to China by a top Biden administration official. Less than a month after the Anchorage meeting, both sides have agreed to work together through a joint group on climate change. So, could climate action be the starting point for improving relations from both sides? Could China and the U.S. get past their differences and find common ground on pressing global challenges? Earlier, I spoke to Max Baucus, the 11th U.S. ambassador to China from 2014 to 2017. With his decades of experience in U.S. political arena, what's his take on the directions of China-U.S. relations? Let's listen in. Let's focus on some specific issues. Climate change. Now, many believe that could be at least one of those common ground. The special envoy of the U.S. President for climate change, Mr. John Kerry, is to visit China. That at least is according to media reports from the U.S. Tell me more about how much really is likely to be achieved.
John Kerry is a very able, a very hardworking U.S. diplomat. He cares. When I was serving as ambassador in Beijing, John Kerry, then Secretary of State, would visit several times, and the main issue for him back then was climate change. And I was so proud when, after a few years, our two presidents, President Obama and President Xi, came together, and the United States representing developed countries, President Xi representing the developing countries on climate change. And of course, we both joined the Paris Accord. There's a high watermark.
Yeah.
It was when President Trump withdrew the United States from the Paris Accord, things started to deteriorate. But now Kerry's trying to bring it back. I think that the Chinese government wants to address climate change, no question about it. And it wants to move a bit away from coal-fired power plants, more toward renewable energy. But it needs to buy some more natural gas to displace some of that coal. And China also might be tempted to try to use climate change as leverage. And okay, America, if you want us to do X, Y, and Z on climate, we want you, America, to repeal those tariffs that you imposed on us. So it's going to be complicated. And that complication is something that it concerns a lot of U.S. policymakers.
Several points I think I can pick up from your answers, Mr. Ambassador. Let's focus on them from one to another. First of all, China's commitment, 2030 to carbon zero and 2060 to carbon neutrality. How much sincerity do you think, Mr. Ambassador, China has already demonstrated?
I highly compliment China for setting those dates, setting those goals. For anybody can achieve something, it's better that she has a goal and a definable goal, a definable date. It's zero carbon, that's very definable. Now, it's going to be difficult, obviously. There's some in the United States who might say, oh, China's just saying that. That's just words. That's just smokescreen. It's not reality. But I disagree with those. I know China well enough to know that they mean it.
The other point, whether China is going to use the climate change interactions as a bargaining chip, from this part of the world, the thinking and the logic is different. Thinking are not categorized into closed boxes, but rather everything seems to be interlinked, even philosophically in a way. And therefore, people would argue when the man-made environment, climate, has becoming soured and poisonous, can the climate change about our nature really be handled with real cooperation? That, I think, is a legitimate question to be asked, too.
Tian Wei, you make a very, very good point. It should be de-linked. It's not be linked. We should address climate on its own. I think there's way, way too much linkage in too many domestic, industrial, and foreign policy areas in the world today. And I think that's partly because of the internet, because of the instantaneous nature of communication today. That tends to force more linkage. It's very dangerous. It's very dangerous because the more issues are linked, the more we face paralysis, the more we can't solve anything.
On the other hand, though, the environment in which, whether negotiators or special envoys could talk to each other, out of poisonous atmosphere, how much can they work on together?
This is not what diplomats usually do.
Yeah.
this is not what countries usually do, but I think if China or the United States were to unilaterally take the first step and show what it's doing to address climate change, and not asking for reciprocity, just show, because that will indicate good faith. Now, some might say, well, gee, you're being a sucker if you just take the first step and don't ask for reciprocity. I don't agree with that. I think it's very, if one country were to take the first step, that would be recognized by the other country and worldwide. And it tends to reduce tension. Each country knows better how to address it, what areas it can maybe take the first step on and what not. But I think that's important.
Mr. Ambassador, as you know very well, at the end of the term of President Trump, the Secretary of State and some members of that administration tried to smash every window they could between China and the United States. Now, this administration coming into the office with much challenge. What is the balance, right? However, we haven't seen, at least read from this part of the world, real constructive steps that this relationship will be much more constructive than it used to be.
Well, I think you're right. I assumed that when Joe Biden became president, that there'd be a floor on the free-falling relationship. But that's not the case. I'm very concerned. I think that the interchange in Anchorage did not help. In fact, I think it hurt the relationship, both sides. I think we're a little too public in the criticism of the other. We all know that generally diplomacy is best conducted behind closed doors. This administration has not shown positive, constructive steps to try to repair the relationship. It hasn't happened yet. And I think that's for a couple of three reasons. One, and the most important, is because China has grown so quickly. It's another power as large, in a certain sense, as the United States. Now, that's new for the United States. It's hard for the United States to know how to deal with that. In the past, the United States treated China as a rising power, but not a co-equal power. But today, China is in fact close enough to being a co-equal power that it causes a whole new set of calculations in the United States, which it really hasn't yet figured out the answer to. So that's one reason why there's not yet been a constructive relationship by this administration toward China. There's another reason, and that's because the administration believes that there will not be a military confrontation between the two countries, but rather it's going to be more economic. And I think that's China's view too. So the United States today is building up its economy as much as it can. First, by addressing COVID, making sure that Americans no longer suffer from COVID-19. Second, with a big infrastructure bill, rebuild American roads and bridges and other infrastructure. Then third is going to be an effort by this administration to give significant assistance to lower income sectors of the United States, address education in the United States, and that make the economy strong. Now, it takes a while to do that, but it's focused much more on the economy, and it's also focused on a third area, and that is trying to orchestrate among its allies, Australia, Europe, and Japan, a concerted effort with respect to China, how to figure out what to do about China. So all that takes time. More quickly it addresses it and shows to China it wants to deal with China, the better. But that works both ways. China has to do the same. China has to show, not just say, but show that it wants to work with the United States. And we haven't seen that yet. We haven't seen it from either side yet.
Interesting. This part of the world will have a different way of looking at it, but that's how, interactions and communications are so important right now. They need to let each other know what they are doing, what they're thinking, not just having a debate under the spotlight. Mainly.
That's true. And we have to remember that the two countries are very different. Their cultures are very different. And we have to better understand that each way. I mean, it's so unfortunate that so few Americans spend time in China, learning what it's all about. because the more people travel in each other's country, the more they're going to realize that basically we people are all alike. American people, Chinese people have the same hopes and desires. What is it? They want decent incomes, food on the table. They want air and water pollution addressed, decent health care, take care of their, I mean, they're the same. But we need to understand that people have to know more about each other's country and spend more time in each other's country.
Mr. Ambassador, you re-emphasized this point many times in my previous conversations with you. One of the times I remember very clearly was during our visit to the tombs of the flying tigers, the museum that a Chinese private citizen built for them. And you said there that really people need to understand China better. But some would argue, yeah, well, there are a lot of people that are learning Chinese language. The U.S. is not lack of China expert one way or another. Why are you still arguing this way?
Well, it's one thing to be a China expert, but a lot of the experts haven't themselves spent a lot of time living in China. Most of them have not. In fact, Robert Lighthizer, the past U.S. trade negotiator, called me up before he went to China and asked my views. What do you do about China? I don't think he'd been to China before, at least not in official capacity. You have to eat, breathe the air, understand it, understand the country, eat, taste the food, talk to people. You just need to get a sense of a country before you can really reach an agreement.
Right. It's about the texture, isn't it? The texture is really helping.
It is.
In this part of the world, there has been suspicion whether the two parties, both the Democrat and also the Republican, have come to consensus, and probably the only consensus they could have right now is against China, and therefore no matter what China does, it will be framed in a narrative that is going to be negative for the bilateral relations anyway. Mr. Ambassador, your take?
I think there's a lot of truth in that, and because President Biden's a Democrat, and because Republicans tend to be more hawkish, President Biden, is not do anything to make him look, quote, soft on China. The trouble is that Republicans know that. And to achieve short-term political gain, they're going to be even more hawkish. And that could very well force President Biden to be more hawkish himself. And of course, that's very dangerous because the further right the United States goes, the more hawkish it is, the more China is going to become hawkish as well, and it just brings us closer to a point, not a military war, hopefully not, but to a point where there could be some incident that causes even greater deterioration. This requires a lot of wisdom on both sides. We need each other. China needs the United States. The United States needs China. Neither country is going anywhere. The two largest economic powers in the world are going to need each other, and I think the leaders both know that. President Biden knows that, President Xi knows that, but they have to show to each other that they do want to begin to work better with each other. But it's very difficult now because of the competitive and strategic challenges that we face, and there's lack of trust. There's just no trust either side at this point, and they have to work together, the two presidents, to try to regain trust.
Some do not understand is why China wants to be a quote-unquote equal partner. Well, the argument from this side is, why can't China be, quote-unquote, an equal partner? And that goes back, as you may know very well, to the history of China over the past 200 years, being colonized, being occupied, being in wars one after another, and of course the ups and downs during the history of PRC as well. So China is very much in desire of becoming an equal partner in the international community, and with whether competitors or partners to work together in that status. Mr. Ambassador, many wonder what's wrong with that. Why can't the United States, both the government and the people, accept that?
Well, there's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah.
Clearly, any country should pursue its own dreams without the interference of any other, so long as the country is pursuing its dreams, it is not trampling upon the rights of other countries. China's a large country. We all know China's history. China today, because it's grown so much, it's wind at its back. It's got kind of like a tiger by the tail. It's strong, and I very much admire that. Um, now, it's many Americans though are concerned about China's rise. They're almost fearful about China's rise, partly because of potential national security prowess the Chinese have, whether it's Huawei, whether it's ZTE, or other technologies which enable the Chinese government to, quote, spy on American companies, or maybe prevent supply chains from operating freely, prevent the precursors of pharmaceuticals to come to the United States. So the United States has a hard time um, addressing COVID. Also, and the United States in turn is reacting by limiting semiconductor shipments to Chinese companies, or claiming that certain are preventing any U.S. company from doing business with a Chinese company that may have, quote, ties with the military. We're in a situation where national security, no pun intended here, tends to trump so many issues. People are frightened, both, at least in America. And the only way to deal with that is for China to reassure in many ways, and that's by actions and deeds, not just words, that it wants to be a responsible world player. You know, the Zellick coined the term responsible stakeholder. China has to show that it is responsible. It's not trying to dominate the United States. China says it's not trying to, but it's got to show that. And the more it shows that, it shows its true intentions, the more some of that insecurity in the United States will diminish.
You talk about the suspicion about Huawei, ZTE, and many other things. We have been lacking of evidence to support these kind of suspicions, and yet many in this part of the world believe that the narrative has been too strong, that there's been lack of content. So I think there are very different perceptions, Mr. Ambassador, as you earlier rightly pointed out, about things from both sides. Can we work that out? What efforts will the United States make?
Well, you make a good point. You know, the United States government, especially the intelligence community, you know, raises the specter of Huawei is spying and installing back doors and so forth in the United States, but it's never produced any evidence. Yeah. The United States has never shown any evidence. You know, we have a phrase in America like, well, where's the beef? You know, show me. And that's not been shown yet. We haven't seen the beef yet. Now it may be there, and to be fair, you know, for national security reasons, it's often difficult for a security agency or intelligence agency to show information it has, because that gets into something like sources and methods, and it compromises the security system. But nevertheless, I believe that the United States government has to do a better job showing the reasons for some of its allegations, and that then, and once it shows them, then maybe there's a way to both countries can start to deal with it. Maybe find a technological solution, find some way to handle it, rather than just making the accusation without any evidence.
Exactly, and that's related to the national security issue that we've been talking about so much over the past 2 years, because the definition of national security really have to be clear, so that the business community, everybody that might be impacted, will be able to do their job. This is such an urgent issue. Do you see, Mr. Ambassador, that is being put on the agenda?
Well, first, your basic point I've found over the years to be very true. Both countries take advantage of the national security charge, not only to protect their own national security, but to widen the definition to protect their own domestic industries. After Eric Snowden revelations, China passed many national security statutes, and it was apparent to me that the country was not only defending itself, but also passing security statutes that would help domestic industries. Now, the United States is doing the same thing, by and large. And but again, I go back to, let's put some more of this technology out on the table. We can discuss it quietly, but it's hard work. It's hard work, because each side is going to be suspicious of the other. But we have to begin to address it. And we also have to begin to not let national security be the large umbrella that encompasses every other adverse action that one country might take against the other.
My last set of questions about trade and economic ties. Mr. Ambassador, I saw you many times at the gatherings of American Chamber of Commerce, for example, at business dinners with the American business community when you were serving as the U.S. ambassador to China. You put so much emphasis on this. But now the business community that I've been talking to from both sides having difficulties about predictability. They thought things were going already to the bottom, but they didn't. So what do you think could be the next step and advice that you could provide to the business community from both sides?
Well, essentially, I believe that that business is the ballast in the relationship. Trade and investment is really the ballast in a relationship. If that were to disappear, then I think there would not be much of a relationship. It's really the trade and investment which allows and helps cause countries to work together better than they otherwise would. That certainly was the case when I was representing the United States several years ago in Beijing. I think it's still the case today. Now, we've got problems. Some of them are supply chain issues. Some of it is decoupling in certainly high-tech areas. And there's concern about protecting ourselves, say, from another pandemic, make sure we have enough drugs and supplies, et cetera. But we have to try. We have to keep moving. We have to keep working on the business relationship. I'm very happy that Premier Li Keqiang hosted a conference virtually with the U.S.China Business Council just a couple of days ago.
Yeah.
They're very important. You just have to keep them up. Just keep at it, and because then, when business continues, they not only is it good economically for both countries, but also they see opportunities, understanding, and they develop relationships with people, which is clearly very important.
Mr. Ambassador, my last point, and probably a personal point as well, is I saw you over the years be able to speak your mind, sometimes out of very difficult situations, sometimes in official positions, sometimes as private citizens. How much do you think both sides could still hear voices like yours?
I wish there were more, but we have a phrase in English, I don't know what it is in Chinese, it takes two to tango.
Yes.
That means if somebody speaks truth to power and is candid and says what he or she thinks, the other person who's listening has to really listen, not just check the box, but actually listen. And unfortunately today, there are many people, I think both sides of the Pacific, I can only speak for the U.S., who really don't listen very much. They've got their minds made up. And it's easy to criticize. It's easy to criticize China. It's very easy to do so. It's harder to not criticize China. It's harder to say, wait, gee, maybe China's not so bad after all. Maybe there's something we could figure out here together, work together. But that takes courage, especially in this very toxic environment in the United States, where any positive statement a member of Congress might make will have his or her head chopped off. It is just very, very toxic today. And a lot of this takes leadership at the top. If President Biden is, and I know he has the capacity, I know he has the inclination to be very constructive, to be more of a father figure, try to, stand up and going to say what's right. He can do very well. Now, people know, even though they speak very negatively at times, they know we have to work together, our two countries. They know that. There's no other option. There is no other option. And the more we can work together, the better. And we just have to follow those better instincts, and that'll help us.
Yeah. Max Baucus, the 11th U.S. ambassador to China. Sir, always a pleasure. Thank you so much.